Let's fire away.
All right, we're rolling. Welcome, everyone, to episode 4 of the official Other League podcast. I am your host, Pain Train, joined by my co-host, as always, Gio Greenbowl. Gio, how's it going? Week 7. We're about halfway through the regular season. How you doing? How you feeling?
I mean, another loss to chalk up to the record book. So, yeah, tough to scroll down and see yourself back in 12th place. So I've had better Sundays, but yeah, it was fun to have your team on by, your personal team on by, because you can just really kind of sit back and, besides the fantasy stress, kind of just enjoy football and kind of watch more intently, I would say, certain games or certain time slots. So it was fun. It was a fun Sunday to kind of not worry about the Packers breaking my heart on top of my fantasy team this week and just watching some football. So it was good. It was a good Sunday. Jumping into our matchups here, we can do some breakdown of my true feelings of fantasy purposes. But it was a good Sunday. How about you?
Yeah, it was pretty good. I was living and dying with the Jets game.
Awesome
That
game.
roller coaster of emotions, probably the biggest win of Robert Saleh's coaching tenure thus far. I'm back with you at 1-5 in the basement. And I'm looking forward actually to the Jets having a bye, so I can just not stress about Zach Wilson imploding, which he hasn't done. He's actually looked pretty good. But yeah, let's jump right into it. I'm gonna get my screen shared. We can make sure that we're all good to go. Just going to do a quick recap. This is not going to be the primary focus of the episode. We're kind of changing up the format, moving forward, kind of looking ahead more than we were looking back. I know we kind of did a recap that took the majority of the episodes. We're going to look ahead now for the majority and just kind of do quick recaps of the week prior. So I'm going to share my screen. And let's kick it off. Let's start with one of the matchups of the week that we highlighted in terms of the projected point totals, and that was Finkel and the Bandits. So kick us off with that matchup. Both of them were projected for 123. So kind of walk us through that matchup and what stood out to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're 3 for 3 in the last 3 pods, picking kind of the game of the week. I mean, we kind of base it around the 120 projections for both teams, so you can kind of just already tell that they were at least deemed that these guys had good matchups going into it. So again, fit the bill, or fit the billing, I should say. I mean, it was came down to that final matchup with Pollard and Keenan Allen on Monday night. And it started out with Keenan Allen scoring on that Monday night drive. So it was I'm sure both managers' hearts were racing a little bit, just kind of sitting down to the wire there. But just to kind of go over recap, I mean, Bandits take it on a real close matchup. Real things that stood out to me. I mean, Keenan Allen obviously returning off the bye gets 21. Travis Etienne trajectory, like we mentioned, just going up. I mean, the guy is, I think, the running back 6 on the year. I might have that wrong. Might be even higher actually. I'm sorry, 3 running back 3.
Yeah, I think he was higher.
Apologize. But yeah, running back 3, and then you're obviously topping that off with McCaffrey. So I mean, that's a really nice pairing. Going to your Jets, Breece Hall with another 20-point score for Ant. So kind of what the Jets said they were going to do, and kind of showed their colors, bringing in Dalvin Cook and starting Breece Hall off slow. But he certainly looked the part as the lead back the last 2 weeks, 28 and 20. So Ant's in a good spot with his running back core. Really highlight just Anthony's downfall, unfortunately, was Brock Purdy, which was his waiver wire move of week 6. You kind of called it. You kind of called a subdue Brock Purdy during our pick'ems. Anthony doesn't really get much from Brock Purdy, going into Cleveland in a pretty tough matchup. I mean, Cleveland with Schwartz at the helm there, their defense looks good. And they're a tough out, especially at home.
Yep.
So yeah, subdued game for Brock Purdy. He would have been better off obviously rolling the dice with Dak on Monday night. Hindsight again, but and then a little subdued game for DJ Moore. I think expectations were a little bit higher. I mean, projections only had him at 13, but I would have said coming off of that Thursday night with Washington and what Fields and him, did to them at home against Minnesota was a pretty nice cake matchup, I thought. Of course, Fields gets hurt, and DJ Moore though even before that wasn't. I think he only had one catch or one target. I'm not sure what it was, but I read
Mhm.
in the first half of that game. So a little subdued game, but overall Anthony scores 120. So you can't really necessarily feel bad scoring 120. Obviously, he takes the loss and gets just the back to 500, but overall his team looks really good. I mean, highlight again. We'll scroll down to his bench if you could, just real quick before we roll over to Bandits.
Mhm.
Adam Thielen again. I mean, 28 points. The guy is just a machine this year for Carolina. I mean, it's with Anthony's depth, sometimes it's hard to even consider, I guess, throwing Thielen in there. But I mean, he could have. I mean, who do you bump? I guess, especially Moore
Mhm.
going for 49 last week. But yeah, Thielen's coming off the bye this week. I mean, I think Anthony's got to find a spot for him. he's,
Yeah.
he's um, he's moving up the charts right now to like the top 5 wide receivers, especially in targets and just production. So
He's the wide
um,
receiver 3 overall right now.
okay, I knew he cracked in the top 5 when I was looking at it. I couldn't
Mhm.
remember exactly where, but yeah, phenomenal. I mean, just the guy's having a hell of a year. So yeah, nothing really. Anthony gets that 120 mark, like we mentioned, that you're usually set on, but
Yep.
unfortunately, he ran kind of into a buzzsaw across the way too. I mean, Aaron puts up 125. Every single player besides Calvin Ridley on his starting 7 here goes for double digits. 11 plus for everyone else on his roster. So yeah, I mean, we kind of touched on Aaron's team throughout the year. I think Aaron's got a pretty solid team. Um, Really from top to bottom, really no weaknesses. I mean, you kind of mentioned some of this. I think you actually took the Bandits last week in this matchup. So you and I took
Mm.
Anthony. So there's our split.
Okay. Yep.
But yeah, Tua again. We kind of said that matchup with Carolina was going to be a really a juicy matchup to have Tua, kind of at home against Carolina. So puts up close to 30. Um, Really, the only highlight would be Hubbard. Chuba, comes
Yep.
in. He has the handcuff a little bit with that backfield with Sanders after that trade, and Sanders sits. Hubbard, slots in, and not a great game from Carolina, being up 14, and then ended up getting blown out by 21 in that game. But hey, he gets in the end zone. He scores, gets 16 for Aaron there, and yeah, everyone else pretty much did their part. I think the only guy that I would look at and said that he actually dropped a couple points was that you highlighted Hawkinson. He only got, I believe, like 8 targets in that game, if I'm not
Mhm.
mistaken. So
Yep.
not really necessarily an uptick in a game against Chicago, but yeah, I mean overall, Aaron is got a really good team, and this was a tough matchup for both managers going into it because you got quality from top to bottom from both of these guys, really. So yeah, good win for Aaron. I think he definitely will feel a little bit happy getting back in. I think that was his first. I'm sorry, second win in a row. So I mean, gets him to 4-2, which is a really nice spot. Tough,
Mhm.
tough break for Ant, but Ant keeps most points with the 121. He's at 821 for the year. He got
Yeah.
the most points almost by almost by
Handedly
80.
leading in points. Yeah.
Yeah, he's up I'm sorry, he's up like 60 something on Arby's right now.
Yep.
So um yeah, so I think Anthony can't be too upset. His team's putting up points and he's got depth, so he should be able to work through the buys. But yeah,
Yep.
good win
Yep.
for Aaron. Anything to add?
Mm. Not really. Yeah, just the big X factor I think for Anth was surprising that he played Purdy in Cleveland,
Hmm.
given that defense and the potential for weather. Even going to Dak or even Sam
Sure.
Howell, who's actually been I think Sam
Uh,
Howell's now like the quarterback 14 on the year. He's getting sacked a ton, but they throw the ball all over the yard. So I think they're like the third most pass heavy team in the league right now. So yeah, maybe like a obviously a woulda coulda shoulda, but yeah, I mean I think you know it's one of those things where like it's close and it could have gone either way, but no real cause for concern. Anthony's coming in actually pretty healthy. His team right now, honestly, I know he has like most of his starting roster, but except McCaffrey, of course, with the oblique. So monitor that. That'll be something to watch with Breeze on a bye. But yeah,
mhm.
no, that's something that matched up pretty well. So I'm gonna kick my three matchups off with the number one seed, Rick, going up against Phil. So Rick stays in first. Pretty run of the mill win over Phil. Puts up 104, which is, pretty low for a win in our league, especially if you kind of get to that 110, 112 mark. You should feel pretty good. But Phil, putting up less than 100, I think for, maybe you can check me, but maybe like the second straight week. And I think it played out pretty much exactly what we thought, where I thought if Phil would have needed big games from Adams, Walker, and Kelsey, he gets two of those three. Adams took a monster hit from Jabril Peppers, and we'll have to monitor that shoulder injury. But I think he got 5 targets.
Yeah.
So down game for Devontae Adams pretty much leads to Phil not coming to 100. Everyone else on his roster pretty much just to be expected. Madison 11.2. Stafford's been playing awesome, but it's not been translating to fantasy. Michael Thomas has been pretty steady around 10 every week. And then, Josh Palmer filling in as a flex. But I mean, Rick's going over to Rick's team. I think my big takeaway is that he had a down week and still got a win. All of his players, I mean, Mahomes has, I think, been he's like the quarterback. Is he like the quarterback 4 or 5 on the year?
He was like five or 6. Yeah.
As opposed to right the quarterback 1 that he drafted him to be. Stephon Diggs is playing out of his mind. He's been awesome this year. Down week for Puka.
Quarterback 4, but yeah, good.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So Diggs has been playing out of his mind this year. He continues to be a monster. Puka, down week for Puka. Not really concerned. He's still going to get he dropped a touchdown. So if he would have caught that ridiculous pass from Stafford, it would have been, 5 for 40 and a touchdown. So Mixon has been sort of steady. He's just like an RB2 kind of. No real spike weeks. Their offense kind of is still stuck in mud, at least their running game. But with the big news for Rick's team, I think, was Kyren Williams' injury. They just said that he's actually probably going to be out until like week 10 at the earliest. I saw. Not sure if they're going to put him on IR, but they did sign Myles Gaskin off the Vikings practice squad. So that to me says that they're maybe not as comfortable with Kyren's injury and his timetable to return. So Rick's going to have to, do a little bit of work there. I know he has Charbonnet in right now, but maybe he can swing a trade with maybe Hopkins or Brown or even Puka. We'll see. But Kittle had his typical down week after a monster. It's kind of just the wave you have to ride with Kittle. Hopkins, he's just the victim of an abysmal offense and an abysmal passing game. And now with Ryan Tannehill probably out at least a week, who knows? Could be longer. Looking at Malik Willis, maybe Will Levis. It's gonna be uglier for Tennessee. And then Minnesota was his, big waiver pickup. I think he picked them up like Sunday morning and then played him. But yeah, they went into Chicago, had that fumble return for a touchdown. So yeah, I mean, Rick just kind of keeps on rolling. Bench looks solid. Marquise Brown's getting a ton of targets. And I know Josh Downs has been actually steadily like real solid for PPR the last few weeks. So yeah, I mean, pretty good win for Rick over Phil, kind of what we thought, and Rick stays in the 1 seed. So any last minute thoughts on this matchup? I think it's pretty much went how we expected. I actually thought Rick would put up more, but
yeah, I think we both were on the ship Lizards this week with Rick. Keeping the train moving.
Yep.
No pun intended, I guess, with you. But it's his 5th win in a row. We kind of earmarked him as the number 1, the clear cut number 1 seed last week. So it kind of went as we expected this week. Yeah, I think you kind of touched on everything that I would kind of want to mention. I mean, I guess the big highlight with Rick, and again, calling him the craziest manager might have just intrigued him last week, because he somehow just does the unthinkable and makes a trade that I mean, honestly, I don't think it was a bad trade either way. If we want to just kind of do a sidebar of it, but I mean, it
Yeah.
comes up and ends up biting him a little bit here now that the guy that probably thought he was trading for that was, I would say, an upgrade over Swift. I mean, at least throughout the first couple of weeks. I mean, it's not to say that Swift is a no name by any means. He looks great, and we'll get to him coming up in one of the matchups here, but. Um, yeah, I think Kyron Williams might have been a slight upgrade and kind of maybe solidified having like a true number one for him, in your
Hmm.
RB2 conversation with Mixon. But that injury doesn't look good, as you mentioned. I mean, I think I read something that he was on a scooter.
Yeah.
I think that was the highlight that was in that
He's in a
Yahoo news.
boot.
I saw it in the NFL on NFL.com as well. Yeah, so um, it's not looking that's going to be just a 1 week injury, unfortunately. So he
Yeah.
kind of does need to scramble a little bit, and trading away Godwin, which wasn't really necessarily a piece he needed. Just kind of noting his wide receiver depth that we kind of went over. But to get back a Roshan Johnson, who I mean, he might not even play this week. Roshan Johnson, he's like still
Hmm.
in concussion protocol, and
Yep.
he missed the game last week. And I thought Dante, Foreman actually ran okay. So I mean, we'll see. I mean, he certainly needs him to come back to slide in. I think this week for sure.
Hmm.
With Mixon on a bye and Williams now hurt. So yeah, I think that's the only thing that I would highlight from Rick is that he kind of they make a crazy trade, and unfortunately it kind of bites him a little bit here moving forward. So, but
Yep.
definitely has pieces to trade, to kind of upgrade, and then going over to Colombian White. Yeah, he another like 95. I think he had 96 last week. I just looked up. So just kind of a run of the mill team, as we mentioned.
Yep.
Kind of a vanilla team outside of a couple guys. I think Adams came out today and actually like either yesterday or today kind of made a statement that like I'm the guy, like and even though they're winning, like he expects to get obviously more targets that he's seen the last two games. So
Hmm.
kind of a similar AJ Brown ish type of vibe, maybe not necessarily screaming on the sideline, but I think they certainly start finding a way to just funnel targets towards Devontae Adams. A little bit more than they did the last two, and I think he kind of laughed at. I think we both kind of laughed at it, the target shares that have just went from like 20 to 13 and
Yep.
then 4 and what was last week?
5, 2 for
5. Okay.
29.
Couldn't see down there. Yeah. But yeah, it's just, I think they're going to find a way to get him the ball. Now it's just a matter of how much more production. I mean, he got 21. Phil got 21 from Kelsey. So even
Yep.
with Adams getting a little bit more of a pop, where's his max out for his team outside of those guys? As you mentioned, I mean, Stafford's not necessarily lighting it up. He's throwing for a lot of yards.
Yeah.
Um, but Kenneth Walker had
Probably
another
around
good
this.
game.
Probably around this total.
Yeah, yeah. So it's going to be tough to necessarily scrap through. You're going to need a couple dud weeks or just kind of like average performances from the other managers that are shooting for that. Like I said, that 120 mark is we've kind of been spot on with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you knocked on every point that I would highlight in that matchup. Kind of a
Yeah.
standard matchup, better team won, I think, overall.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the good thing is Kyle Pitts got in the end zone.
Hmm.
He's actually looked pretty good the last couple weeks. So I know I'm sure a lot of people have had trade discussions with Phil over Kyle Pitts. I
Sure.
certainly have.
So have I.
Yeah, so we'll see on that front. But yeah, it's good that to see Kyle Pitts actually score. So yeah, let's keep rolling with your second matchup. Let's roll to this next matchup that I think we highlighted was Andre and Riggs.
Yep.
With
Yeah.
Andre getting the win 121 to 95.
Yep. So again, going to that 120 mark that we keep kind of touching on. I mean, he certainly gets that mark. Tyreek Hill just keeps putting up points for Andre.
Crazy.
Um, yeah, I mean that offense is just ridiculous. I mean, they got Tua. Tua's the number one quarterback in terms of his passing yards. Hill's obviously setting records in terms of yards he has. And then we know about the running backs, what they're doing with Mostert and Achane, or Achane, I should say. But yeah, that offense has been ridiculous, and Tyreek is certainly playing a huge role for it. So he
Mhm.
gets massive production from him. DeAndre Swift, which again, I mean, what a year he's having with Philly. Another
Yeah.
another really solid performance. I mean, he's been tearing it up since week two. And
Yep.
that big game he had against Minnesota. So yeah, I mean that's a great. I thought that was ends up being a great trade, obviously, because Williams goes down unfortunately this week. But Really solid production. I think Jonathan Taylor's just really getting his feet wet. Unfortunately, now we'll get to that, but the Richardson news, we'll see what that offense looks like. But he gets in a few more touches. I thought the promising thing was the targets. I mean, he had a couple catches throughout that game too. So he's certainly going to get the volume once they started kind of slowly getting him up to speed. So yeah, I mean, really just a really solid team overall with a couple guys that can certainly pop, and they did for Andre. And then unfortunately with Riggs, I mean, Fields is really the big thing to highlight here with the injury. Coming off of what he did, I should say, on Thursday night, we kind of highlighted it with DJ Moore in the matchup with Anthony, but Fields only being able to put up 5 before getting taken out of that game, and now we'll see how long that injury lasts for him. It's tough. That's tough I'm sure for Steve to see. I mean, he Sidebar texted us about how frustrating it is to be a Fields owner and maybe even a little fandom, I'll say a little bit, just based on him being in Chicago. I'm sure he gets it thrown down his throat from that area, but tough for him to go down. And I think that was a big difference for some of the expectation of points. He gets Eckler back, who didn't really look very explosive against Dallas. Again, Dallas being a pretty stout defense. I mean, at least defensive front. Not exactly crazy to see that he only had 10. I mean, the projection for 19 was pretty high, but I mean, your expectation for Eckler is that high. But Mostert, the guy's playing out of his mind. I mean, another multi-touchdown game. Yeah. He's got 9 rushing and 2 receiving. Leads the NFL in rushing touchdowns. I think he leads the NFL in touchdowns with 11.
He does.
So it's the guy's the guy. If you can get Eckler in the fold and get him back up to top 5 status, which we expect Eckler to be, having Mostert and Eckler is just as deadly as the Anthony combo that we were talking about with ETN and McCaffrey. It's a really nice duo to kind of lead off with. And then you mentioned Lockett in just highlighting him in that pick 'em last week. So I just want to credit to you. I mean, Lockett with 15, just another steady performance to kind of slot in there. I think these are kind of what his receivers he's going to have to lean on and play matchups, because he doesn't have an out and out true number one, I would say, like a number one receiver. I mean, Devontae Smith, I mean, had a couple bad drops. But I mean, that's a tough offense to rely on, week in and week out to be a big time receiver for you in a PPR league. Addison didn't look terrible. I mean, not a lot of points in that game, and kind of a slugfest, in terms of a division game. And then, that he gets a nice performance from Lockett, and then he's got Watson coming back from bye. So we'll see how Steve's receivers pan out. I really like his running backs though. Yeah. And now the Fields injury is going to be the long-term thing. But all in all, I think outside of the Fields injury, this would have been a really tight matchup. I think he would have easily got into the 120s as well, and it would have came down to the wire in terms of just the score. So both these teams are two of the better teams, I think, in the league. And we'll just see kind of where that injury for Fields ends up playing out. I mean, he has Jordan Love, he has CJ Stroud, so I mean, he definitely has guys he can plug and play if it's just a couple weeks. But other than that, I think Steve's team looks really good. And Andres, I think, is trending up. I think he's getting Deontay Johnson back. The rest of his team looks really solid. So yeah, I mean, Andre's got another really formidable team. He's in second with 4-2, and he's going to be a tough team to beat on a week in and week out basis, I think. I don't know if you have anything else to chime in on, but two good managers there.
Yeah, no, I just kind of agree. I think having Tyreek Hill on pace, I think he's on pace for like 2,300 receiving yards, which is bonkers to think about. Having that in your lineup, and Jalen Hurts, who by all accounts had a rough game against the Jets. He looked like skittish almost in the pocket. Still gets there with the rushing. He's his floor. I mean, if this is his worst 20. Game, if this is his bad game, like he still gets 20, gets the touchdown overturned, and he's just, I think his floor as a weekly point scorer, I think is really strong. So yeah, I think two teams that are still kind of trending up. I know Steve's kind of been falling down the standings recently, but I think his team's kind of trending up with Mostert just continuing to dominate and Eckler coming back. Yeah, no, nothing else to add after that. Let's roll to the fourth matchup that we're covering. I think one of the low key most interesting matchups that I was following this week was Arby's and Tiburon. Tiburon takes it 117 to 99. Um, I think these two teams could be low key both. I could see both of these teams making a run in the postseason. I think they're two of my favorite rosters. I do like a lot of other rosters, but I think Ryan's roster from top to bottom he's put up, some pretty good weeks, but he hasn't had the monster week that I think I assumed he was going to get, especially from Lamar and Andrews and Bijan, who's been good, but he hasn't been awesome, which is weird to say because he's looked real good. I think he's kind of capped by that offense in general, but Amon-Ra going off, welcome back Amon-Ra. He's got Pittman and Ayuk. It's a really solid wide receiver tandem. And then having Buffalo's D is just a really solid floor every week because their D is real tough. The only knock on Ryan's team kind of moving forward is Dameon Pierce, who's been he's been abysmal this year. And the team seemingly might not think he's a fit for that offense. Devin Singletary's playing more, so we'll kind of see as we go along. I think Pierce is going to still have some big weeks. He'll score a couple multi-touchdown games, but yeah, I mean, he's got Kareem Hunt kind of starting to maybe split some work with Jerome Ford. I think Jerome Ford, he was still operating as the lead back. Brandon Cooks gets into the end zone, but yeah, I think Ryan's team looks real strong moving forward. And then going over to Ben's team, if Josh Allen only putting up 17.8, that's gonna lower your ceiling that you have. AJ Brown, I mean, everyone else on his team pretty much did well, outside of the guys that I don't think can be necessarily relied on week in and week out. Like Rachaad White has been pretty disappointing. Debo he left with the injury, but should be okay moving forward. He gets a couple friendly matchups kind of moving forward. And then Derrick Henry, what is the outlook on Derrick Henry? He had the long run. He gets in the end zone. He's on a bye this week after the London game, but coming out of it, what's that offense kind of look like? I think Ben, if he would have stole this win, would have felt a little bit better kind of moving into the next portion of the season. But AJ Brown is a monster. Nico Collins continues to get targets and continues to get downfield looks with CJ Stroud. I think that offense is trending up. And Sam Laporta had another strong target share, but only came through with 4 for 36. Still, a top 5, potentially top 3 tight end option every week. So Zach Moss on his bench. If anything happens to Jonathan Taylor, he kind of moves in. Zach Moss is currently the running back 5 on the year. I just saw, I believe. So he still continues to get work in the passing game. So even if Rachaad White, he doesn't want to play him, he can slide Zach Moss into his flex or RB2 spot. So I mean, both these teams I think are going to be around come the playoffs. I think they both will make the playoffs, or my early prediction, but that's kind of where I stand on both these teams. I think both of them are gonna be players as we kind of come into the second half of the regular season. Any closing thoughts on either of those teams or that matchup as we kind of keep it rolling?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree. I mean, you kind of nailed it with I think we both picked Tiburon in this matchup. So, I mean, we kind of anticipated. I mean, this was another tight one. The projections were only within 5. So, really, the only note to add that I think we both really like these rosters. I've made numerous comments throughout these episodes on what Ryan did in the draft. I think he drafted really, really well. And so did Arby's. I mean, so did Ben. I mean, his team from top to bottom is really good. I mean, does he kind of hope that Derrick Henry gets traded and Tajik, he has Spears and he gets another running back out of that deal, which would be insane, but and it would be Ben's luck to have that happen. I just joke. I always say Greenlaw, but
Yeah.
anyways, but I mean, because I think that second RB spot for at least Ben's team, like you highlighted, is going to be tough to rely on week in and week out. Now the rest of his roster is great, and Zach Moss has been great, so we'll see how that split works. Like you said with Jonathan Taylor, I mean, running back five, he's doing well with the touches that he's had while he's been out, and even when Jonathan Taylor's been back the last 2 weeks. So
I'll just one last thing on Moss. I don't think Moss is going away. Like, I don't think it's going to be something where Taylor comes in and all of a sudden he has like a Breece Hall level share of the running back touches. Like, I think at most it'll be like a 55-45 split. Like, I don't think Moss is going away.
Yeah, I agree with you, and especially with Richardson being down now for the year, I think they
Yep.
don't really necessarily. They're hoping to keep Jonathan Taylor healthy too.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. I mean, and then going to Ryan's team, again, both these teams lack a little bit of like bench depth, if you want to call it, but like starting roster wise, looks like again top to bottom a really really tough team that you kind of match up with on a week to week basis. I mean, both teams are looking at that RB2 spot, like you mentioned. Dameon Pierce hasn't looked like he did his rookie year, unfortunately, and that offense is better. So
Yeah.
just not relying necessarily as much on the run and even the run that he's been getting. I mean, to your point, he's splitting it with Devin Singletary now, like essentially 50-50, at least this past week. So that's really the only spots that I see on either one of these rosters. But to your point, I mean, two really good teams that I think, have, rosters that should, get them to the point of like playoff contention, if not in the playoffs this year for sure.
Yeah, agreed. Let's move on to the fifth matchup. This is yours. You take it away. It was a 11 versus 12 match against you and Nils to determine who would slide into the 12th spot. So take it away.
Well, the winner of the loser bowl, I should say, or the loser of the loser bowl, is Green Bay Packer. I failed to hit the 100 mark once again in this matchup. I've only put up over 100 2 out of the first 6 weeks. So it's been a tough year just to get to that 100 mark. I thought with Cooper Kupp coming back, I would start seeing that consistency after last week, but unfortunately the rest of my team pretty much threw it mostly just kind of subpar dud performances overall. I mean, Cooper Kupp will start on my side.
Yep.
27. He certainly looks like he's back.
Yeah, he looks healthy.
Had a really good week last week. As I mentioned, just missed a couple throws with Stafford. But yeah, he's back. He's healthy. That connection's there. He kind of slid back into that wide receiver one part, or role, I should say, in that offense. I know people were talking if that was going to be Puka's kind of role because he's kind of was the placeholder, I should say, for the first couple of weeks. But I think it's definitely Kupp 1 and Puka 2 in that offense for sure. So happy to have him back. Tough to go the first 4 weeks without your number one pick, but he's back and he's certainly a big cog of my point totals weekly. And then I just want to highlight Pacheco just on my side. The guy's been really, really steady for me. Probably outside of Jacobs kind of coming to life a little bit with some double-digit performances. He's been easily my most dependable steady back in an offense that he's getting the consistent run on, which I've been pleasantly surprised with. I mean, you think with the Chiefs, you're just getting a guy that can score a couple touchdowns. But overall, he's been doing a little bit of everything with getting some consistent runs, 15 carries or so a game, which is great to see. Can definitely
15,
pop and break one.
15 plus carries in 4 straight.
Yep. And which is great in an offense with Mahomes, where they're going to be throwing it a lot. So just really highlighting there. I mean, Cole Kmet finally came back down to earth for me. Throws up 2.9. And then, Joe Burrow, I mean, that it's kind of an odd game. It looked like a really promising game early on. I mean, they scored early. I rightfully made the decision to sit T. Higgins, even though he was playing, which, I mean, Osborne putting up 8, nothing crazy, but, Higgins only throwing up 4. So I'm happy to at least make that right decision, so to speak. A little disappointed in James Cook as well on my side. Needed some points on Sunday Night Football against the Giants. I just don't understand the Bills offense. Not to go on a tangent here, but I mean, James Cook ripped off like two 15-yard runs like back to back and like a seven. And as a manager watching that, I'm like, all right, just feed this guy a little bit. Like they were a slow moving offense. They weren't doing anything overall. And then they just bring in Latavius Murray when they get down to like the 25-yard line every drive. Just infuriating as an owner of James
Yeah.
Cook. But yeah, subdued game. I want, my expectations were a little higher from that standpoint. Just expecting, going now we're going over to Nils, I guess. Expecting CeeDee Lamb, who really put the nail in the coffin, so to speak, on Monday night, to do what he did. I thought, the whole conversation leading up from the week was that Dak was talking to CeeDee Lamb. They were trying to iron things out on the offense, coming off a very, pretty poor performance from their standards against San Fran in a blowout. It was a get right game for CeeDee Lamb, so I knew I needed to be up,
Yep.
more than I was with James Cook only putting up 7 on Sunday night. But yeah, not cracking 100 was the story for my side. And then Nils gets some really, really good performances. I mean, we've been kind of drilling home, at least I have, of his lack of running back depth. But Stevenson comes back and
Yep.
and gives the big FU to me. He has the best game of his season. He went out early, and my expectation, not really following that game intently, was like, all right, Stevenson's out. I saw Zeke score. I'm like, okay,
Probably
cool,
done for the day.
probably out. Yeah, and kind
Yeah.
of tuning that game out because it was pretty, I thought, overall uneventful.
Yep.
Just with the other stack of games that were going on at the time, I forgot what I was watching, but and come to look at the score, get the update on our matchup, and Stevenson comes back in the game, and not only comes back but scores late in the fourth quarter from like the 1 or 2 yard line. It's just unbelievable the luck I've had so far with certain players that, and I probably honestly I deserve that for bashing the guy all year. But yeah, so he gets a good performance out of Stevenson. Drake London's been looking really, really good.
Yeah.
Kind of
Yeah,
talking
he
about
has.
that offense with Pitts. Joni Smith was kind of a reliable fantasy player for the last couple of weeks. Now Drake London consistently putting up, and easily his best game, I think. But I think it was actually his best game. But
Yep.
overall, just his he's been really steady. Looks like a wide receiver one, which is cool to see. Because I think last year the expectations were there, but he necessarily didn't live up to maybe the bill of being a rookie number one receiver.
Hmm.
But he's looked good. That offense has looked pretty good overall.
Yep.
And Jalen Waddle, we kind of touched on. I mean, my expectation was that he was going to have a solid game. I mean, how can you not against Carolina? Um, he finds the end zone. So yeah, I mean, Nils puts up 106, basically his projections, and I just had a couple duds on my end, being really the story of the matchups here. But yeah, good win for Nils. He gets out of the trio of 1-win teams, gets himself to 2-4. And yeah, I'm scrapping out at the 12 spot, really looking up 1-5. Not outlook's not looking promising
Yeah.
to even try to get to the playoffs, barring a massive like win streak. So yeah,
Right.
tough loss for Green Bull.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a tight game. I mean the it's tough because like I don't point to anything that I would have done differently. Like I wouldn't have played Goff over Burrow. James Cook, like you said, the fear with me, I like James Cook coming into the year. The fear with me with James Cook was that he was just going to get empty touches in between the 20s. And without target, like he didn't have a single target in that game.
No,
So if he's just getting empty carries in between the 20s, this is what, you always fear you can get. And I think you're right with the Bills offense. I don't get it. I don't understand the fascination with these slow backs like Latavius Murray and like,
he's the oldest.
now that
Latavius Murray is the oldest back in the NFL, the oldest active.
was he like 34?
Yeah, like 30. Like they said it on the game, and I was fuming when they said that. I mean,
He's
get
like
this guy
Frank
the
Gore
ball.
he's like Frank Gore when he was on the Jets. He's just soaking up empty touches. And now, there's a report that maybe Fournette might be working out for them with
Yeah,
Damian
I
Harris
saw
getting
that too.
injured. So it's I don't know. I mean, I know James Cook, he's built like Jahmyr Gibbs, where he's like nine 200. But yeah, for him not to have a single target in that game was that it's unacceptable to me. So yeah, just I think an overall tough loss. Pacheco looks awesome. He's getting target. He's getting a lot of work in the passing game too, and he runs like his hair's on fire.
He
Yeah.
does.
So yeah, I think Nils gets a good win. He definitely needed it. And let's get to our last
Yep.
matchup of the week. With the lowest point total of the week so far, or of last week, I should say. The Bastards take down my team 115 to 89. Not really close. It wasn't close going into Monday night. Logue was, I think he was down, or he actually was up going into his game with Herbert. I think he was up like 2 points or something. Yeah, I mean, Logue puts up 115. Herbert comes out, 227 and 2. Christian Kirk and Amari Cooper just steady. Cooper had this sick catch along the sideline. My God, that
Hmm.
was insane. And then Robinson and Barkley. Barkley handling 24 carries, I believe he got 24 carries, 93, 5 for 4.
Hmm.
He's looks back. So Lowe getting Saquon back is obviously huge. Evan Ingram's been just like a steady top 7 tight end, and then he plays Dalton Schultz,
He's been hot.
the two tight end bill. Dalton Schultz has a touchdown in 3 straight games, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. He's
Um,
really coming
he
alive.
played a tight end in the flex, which is you're just hoping for a touchdown, and he got one with Schultz. So yeah, Lowe putting up 115. Going over to my side, I mean, when you put up 115, you know, it could go either way. And in this case, I obviously had 89, putting up less than 90. You don't expect to win. We'll going down to should have, could have. Jonnu Smith, I had in my lineup. I thought Tyler Conklin would get more run. He was due for a touchdown. He actually had a touchdown, but he was pretty close. And then I think he lost it out of bounds or something. Trevor Lawrence, 18.7, not what I thought would happen with Indianapolis. He started really slow. I think the first half he had like 3 points. Metcalf still hasn't really gotten there from a ceiling standpoint. He's been pretty steady, but more like a mid to low end wide receiver 2. I thought I was kind of potentially getting a potential wide receiver 1. Gabe Davis, that was his dud game. I was a week early, not wrong, just early in calling Gabe Davis not scoring. Played him over the London game, and I probably should have thought that variance was going to hit. And then Alvin Kamara has been my steadiest player now. He's my steadiest healthy player. He just continues to get insane volume on what is sort of a boring offense. I'll have to say Derek Carr still doesn't look kind of right, but I think that offense could be trending up, and Kamara's been a monster. We'll get to David Montgomery in a second, but Garrett Wilson, he's just continues to be a target machine, and he's on a bye this week. He'll be healthy off of his ankle injury. He kind of went out, he came back, but Zach Wilson, as long as Zach Wilson's playing, and as long as Zach Wilson's playing as sort of pretty competently as he's been playing, he's not turning the ball over. He's throwing it pretty much down the field. He's not just checking it down, and he's targeting Garrett Wilson a ton. So Garrett Wilson is going to be locked into my lineup moving forward. And then torn between Detroit or the Jets D, I went with Detroit in the better matchup. Both of them kind of got home. But yeah, I mean, good win for Logue's team. I mean, he just continues to stack wins, even if it's not pretty. But everyone else, I mean, he's consistently putting up points, and his team pretty much almost all of them hit the projection. His big spike was Dalton Schultz, getting him to that 115 mark. So, and we can get to kind of moving forward, but Zeke gets in the end zone. So I think he's got 2 running backs that he can start every single week. Saquon is just going to get healthier, and he's going to continue to get as much work as he can handle, even if the Giants offense is looking pretty rough. And maybe they even are a little bit better with Tyrod. Who knows? But yeah, so any takeaways from my matchup? We can wrap my matchup up, and then we'll roll into the state of the train.
I mean, yeah, well, I'm looking forward to that, by the way. But yeah, the overall takeaway, I mean, I guess I got to stop picking against Logan. I mean, we didn't get to the pick'ems yet, but I feel like I've picked against him 2 weeks in a row, and kind of made me look foolish. But I mean, he gets to 115, which we talked about. That's such a good happy spot from just from playing seven guys in a PPR league. You get to that 115, 120 mark. You're in a good
Mhm.
spot, and he had a couple good
Yep.
pops, like you mentioned. Dalton Schultz, who was trending up, was definitely a tight end target. On waivers the last couple weeks. So I mean, great, good play. Played the matchup, with Pickens on bye, and he's really had it strapped together. Just kind of a mismatch of buys and injuries. Obviously, losing Chubb early. So I mean, good on him. Moving on to you. I think Kamara's 6 overall. Since he's been back, I should say, this averaging
Mhm.
as the 6th overall running back. So
Mhm.
we talked about your hit on him, and just kind of playing the waiting game, and him eating up all the volume. To your point, those catches, I mean, 36 yards. That I mean, it's crazy the amount of catches and how short they're just dumping it off to him. But
It's just dump offs at the line of scrimmage and swing passes. That's all it is.
uh, yeah, and I think Garrett Wilson is starting to come to life, like you mentioned. So I think on your side, that's at least a nice thing to see as a Jets fan, obviously, but more importantly for the fantasy purposes, where we kind of thought he was going to be with Rodgers, still uber talented, obviously. So he's getting the run. Thank God he didn't get hurt, because if not, they might have been tearing up that turf, tomorrow.
He
So
still should be. If Woody Johnson is listening, and I know Woody Johnson's going to tune into our podcast, if he's listening, replace the turf with grass next season, please.
I mean, I think the Aaron Rodgers injury was enough, but yeah, seeing that was a little scary. But yeah, I think you nailed all the points. And I think this is a good time for you to kind of let us know your thoughts.
Yeah. So outside of the tilt of sitting Zay Flowers and playing Gabe Davis, but yeah, I just kind of wanted to give a state of the train as we're at. So we do the runaway train where I'll get on a tangent on something, but I just want to say the state of the train and kind of what happened leading up to the point where I'm currently at 1-5. I think I'm like ninth in points. This season has been coming on. This defending championship title season has been one of the most trying that I've had. I don't think I've been hit with injuries as hard as I have been this year. Fortunately, the past couple of years I've been, I think, relatively healthy off the top of my head, but there have just been some seasons where some managers are just decimated by injuries. Arby's a couple of years ago when he lost Dobbins, I think immediately after he drafted him, and then lost Derrick Henry that same year. This year it looks like it's mine, and maybe it's the fantasy gods reaping me for trading draft picks, and we quickly established that that's no longer allowed. So I got the title with trading draft picks, and kind of going into the state of my team and where I stand and what I've endured this season. After the draft, I fully was confident in my picks and my strategy. I had a very specific strategy going into the draft where, and I'll just share my screen here because I have my draft up. So going into the draft, I had a set strategy of starting double tapping receiver. I was pumped to get Garrett Wilson. Doing the mocks, it kind of seemed that I was going to get him, especially with, I think Aaron confirmed he was probably going to keep Pollard. I think a couple days before the draft, I was talking to him. It was leaning that way. So getting Garrett, I felt super confident with him and Rodgers. Loved getting Metcalf where I got him. Didn't have a 4th-round pick. Always locked into David Montgomery as my RB1. We did the runaway train segment 2 weeks ago, and I told you my thoughts on why I thought David Montgomery would be an RB1. Alvin Kamara, was pumped to get him as my first 7th-round pick because I did not have a 6th-round pick. Got Brian Robinson. I like Brian Robinson, and now he's an RB2 on Loke's team. Zay Flowers, I always thought had real good breakout potential, and he's the wide receiver 1 in Baltimore. Looks good, just going to keep trending up. Treylon Burks is whatever. Love getting Anthony Richardson for the upside that we saw, and the potential that we saw, I should say. He was second in points per game at the quarterback position for when he was healthy, only behind Josh Allen. I think he was going to be a monster this year. And to get him as sort of like my ceiling play at quarterback, and then Geno as my sort of floor play, was always kind of the strategy. So I kind of executed on the draft strategy that I went, and the run out that I've had has just been wild. So before the season even starts, Jeff Wilson, who I bought into that Miami offense, I wanted a piece of it, and 3 Dolphins running backs went back to back to back. Mostert went, or Achane went first to Andy. Mostert went to Steve, and then I took Jeff Wilson. Jeff Wilson goes on IR with a random oblique injury right before the season starts. Week 1, Aaron Rodgers tears his ACL, or tears his Achilles, 4 plays into his Jets tenure. And that just craters Garrett Wilson's potential ceiling. Next week, Anthony Richardson, I am in a matchup with Andy. Anthony Richardson scores 17 points in the first half, 2 rushing touchdowns against Houston. He goes out with a concussion and is out the next week. Comes back and is on pace again to have a monster rushing performance, gets injured, and now he's out for the season. That week, Justin Jefferson also has a significant hamstring injury, goes on IR. I can weather the injury to Richardson. I can weather the injury to Justin Jefferson. I can weather it. I'm not saying I can replace Justin Jefferson, but I can weather it because I have made the trade for Gabe Davis, have Zay Flowers, Garrett Wilson with the target share. I cannot lose David Montgomery. He was the X factor on my team and the linchpin for where my floor was going to be. He gets injured in the Tampa game, and he might be out 3 weeks. He might be out 2. He might be out just this 1. Who knows? He's not going on IR yet, so he's probably going to be out 2 to 3. But not having David Montgomery and not having Jefferson and Richardson and not having Rodgers with Garrett Wilson has been devastating, to say the least. So state of the train, full transparency, I have myself, and this isn't a pity vote. I truly think that my team and my trajectory is trending down just because of the injuries and where things stand. I have myself in 12th, and that is where we sit moving forward. I do think I may have some spike weeks. I still like the guys that I have. Like this week, even for instance, I think Geno and DK can connect against Arizona. We'll get to those matchups when we preview them, but that's kind of where things stand. I've been hit with injuries, and it does not look like a title defense is going to be happening this year. But yeah, so anyone who's been hit with the injury bug in seasons and they've just been ravaged by injuries, I'm feeling it right now. So that's where we stand. That is the state of the train going into week 7.
Well said. Good recap. You might need a lot of those points to throw in a PowerPoint, so make sure you jot those down or
I'm being really cautious with my waiver moves now. Like I was planning on potentially picking Michael Mayer went for a lot more than I thought. I was potentially thinking about
too.
potentially thinking about picking up Michael Mayer, and I'm honestly just like, I don't want to add a transaction with Michael Mayer and just play the tight end roulette. I'm just going to ride with Jonnu Smith for the foreseeable future. But I'm already at 19 or 20 transactions, so I'm going to start to get the presentation rolling and start to make notes of what the outcomes were of my transactions. With that said, we turn the page to week 7. And we'll get into the previews for the week 7 matchups. And we will kick it off with the Toilet Bowl 2.0 Pain Train versus Green Bowl. Let's get into it. G, you are projected 103. I'm projected 92. What are your thoughts? What are your matchups? Just kind of run down them quick, and then I will get over to my side and kind of what I'm thinking and what our vibes are on this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, I think the league will get a joy out of, or a kick out of the fact that the two guys doing the pod are sitting in the toilet bowl at 1-5 this week and have to recap their team. Yeah, and they get to listen to this, which is got to put a smile on their faces, right?
It's
But
truly a loser goes home game,
I mean, no one's
realistically.
and realistically, nobody's rooting for you and I this year. I mean, I've won the league 4 times. You're the defending champ. Nobody
Yeah,
wants to see us win it. I'll just throw that little sidebar in
it's
there.
fair.
But
It's fair.
yeah, tough. I mean, we're 1-6, losers done. Like loser is
Yeah.
definitely done. If we're not already done anyways. But yeah, loser of this game is buried. And really just kind of playing to not finish last. But
Yeah.
yeah, matchup wise, I mean, I got really no decision that it need to be made at quarterback for me. I'm rolling with Goff. Goff's been steady, and Burrow's on bye, so
Yep.
easy decision making there. At Baltimore could be a tough matchup, but Detroit's look good, so I don't see why he doesn't continue to sling it and just be
Yep.
steady for me. Cooper Kupp at home against Pittsburgh.
Good spot.
If Stafford can stay upright with that D line coming at him, yeah, I like that matchup. I don't really know what I'm gonna do at wide receiver 2 this week yet.
Hmm.
Jackson Smith looked pretty good, and you playing Geno. I mean, it looked better, I should say. I mean, so possibly a good spot against Arizona to see if that volume continues. I mean, I still have Osborne on my bench.
Hmm.
And if I really, really want to put any faith against the Packers scoring against a really bad defense in Denver, I could play Dobbs, but we'll see. TBD on the second spot.
Yep.
Then I got Jacobs at Chicago. I think that's a good matchup.
Locked in, obviously. Yep. He's been
Yeah,
good. He's been a volume machine. So
he's number one I think he's number one in like targets for running backs, which I
that
I
doesn't
thought was a read.
surprise me.
He's 35 targets, which is like
That's
doesn't sound like a crazy number. I mean, I guess Kamara will smash that at some point when he gets a few more
yeah.
games under his belt.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jacob's been getting the passing work as well from Jimmy G. So I like that spot. Pacheco's been steady and he's home against the Chargers. I think the projection of 12 or 13 points is fine. So I like that matchup. This is going to be an interesting one. I didn't really make a bid or do anything really with the tight end spot. You kind of alluded to some Pitts conversations, but even conversations outside of that, just to
Yeah.
see what's going on. Because if Fields doesn't play, Komet's not really might not be a great ad. And then I can't believe Jones is still questionable, but he should be in a smash matchup against Denver, coming off the
Yeah.
bye. You would think,
Yeah.
but I don't know if they're just putting the Q tag on him, or if this hamstring injury was a lot more significant, obviously, than we anticipated it being. But if it was, I don't know why he played in that Detroit game. But anyways, so I
Right.
like overall, I like where the team's at. I mean, still seeing the projections at 103 sucks because I just not a great number. I haven't really been projected more than I think like 112 last week. Again, it's a tough to see a lot of points outside of a couple guys in this lineup. So we'll see. Hopefully the second tier guys, and I get the three, my three starting running backs actually play and
Yeah.
play well. So yeah, that's kind of where Green Bull is this week.
Yep. Yeah, going over to my side, so I have the stack with Gino and DK. I think this potentially could be, a big game for DK Metcalf. He's kind of just been, like I said before, just kind of he's been steady. He's been sort of like a wide receiver 2-3. But he had 10 targets last week, and I think going up against Arizona at home, I think this could be a potential get right spot for both him and Gino coming off a pretty down game, and Gino he got destroyed against Cincinnati's pass rush. Zay Flowers still projected 10.8. What's up with that, Yahoo? Um, he's, I mean, Zay Flowers has been pretty
Pretty good.
pretty good.
Yeah.
And he's coming off his first touchdown game of the year, his first touchdown game of his career, and he's at home against Detroit, 12th best team against wide receivers, only projected 10.8. Maybe that'll change. Obviously, Kamara's in. I picked up Zach Evans. I bid $26. I feel like I was late to Puka Nakua. I didn't spend up enough on him. And I'm basically just hoping that Zach Evans is the guy that gets the first few carries and is the starter.
Sure.
Pretty much I was desperate. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. Who knows? They signed Myles Gaskin off the Vikings practice squad, so maybe they get him run. And they also signed Darrell Henderson back, who's familiar with that team. So we'll see. I mean, I this very well could be a Amari DiMercado situation where they said, he's the starter for now, and then the game starts going and Darrell Henderson looks up and he has 13 carries and a rushing touchdown. So we'll see there. Jonnu Smith he's been pretty steady. He's just locked in. And then Gabe Davis at New England. Hopefully this is a touchdown week. I didn't really mess with trying to stream defenses. I already have Detroit and the Jets. Jets are on a bye, and I don't want to drop them during the bye because I think they have one of the best defenses in the league. So I'm just rolling with Detroit. I think their pass rush might get after Lamar a little bit, but we'll see. Only projected 92. So we'll see. I mean, like I said, I'm not playing Trevor Lawrence, even if he's active at New Orleans. That's a rough spot, and I think that could be a slow slog of a game. And hopefully Jeff Wilson, if he plays, I'm not playing him at Philly, but I would like to see him kind of get some run, see how he looks in that offense. And David Montgomery still has projected, but he's not going to play. So
who do you pick?
I actually picked myself.
I'm gonna pick myself as well. So we'll split there.
Yeah, we'll split there. No, actually I'm gonna change. I'm gonna take you.
No way. Picking against
himself. So I think I don't think it's gonna matter with your wide receiver 2 spot. I think Goff gets close to his projection. I think Kupp goes nuts. And I think Jacobs scores more than this. I think Pacheco's in a really good spot. And I do think Aaron Jones, if healthy, he got the questionable designation, limited in practice, but it was a Wednesday practice. So we'll see what happens on Thursday and Friday. But if he's right, I mean, he's gonna shred Denver.
Hope so.
So yeah, it's hard to feel confident in any of my players kind of getting there, but we'll see. But I'm going to pick you for this one.
Yeah, I'm going to take me just with a slight, I guess steadiness of those RBs that we just kind of talked about. So, but again, I mean, overall, this matchup stinks. I mean, this
watch us put up like the league high. It's just like how it goes. Like it'll be impressive. It'll be like 150 to like 144 or something. We'll see.
I'd love to see an output like that. All right, let's move on.
Let's move on to a more favorable matchup. Bastards and Arby's 4 versus 7. Why don't you run down Arby's, kind of kick us off, and then move into the Bastards, and I'll give my kind of closing thoughts on it before we pick.
Cool. Yeah, so Arby's got a kind of an interesting dilemma here with Derrick Henry on bye. So kind of talked about that depth. So unfortunately he's got to go with Rachaad White. He's been okay, relatively steady, I should say, for Tampa Bay, but not a guy that's been lighting it up necessarily. And he's going to slot in Ingram, as you mentioned, on that situation out in Arizona with Connor out right now. It was kind of a wait and see. This guy was supposed to be the starter, but wasn't healthy. Nils shelled out a pretty good penny for the guy that was deemed the starter last week and ended up not even being it. So he's going to play Ingram at Seattle. So his running backs don't really, there's really nothing great or outstanding. He just kind of has to throw who he has with bye weeks this week coming up. An interesting move that I thought, I mean, I guess I didn't realize that Nico Collins was also on bye. So Arby's got a mismatched team here. He's playing Jaleel against the Packers in this flex. The Denver running back who kind of, I would say, ceded work back to Javonte Williams, last week, I would say, when coming back
early down work. So,
yeah. Yep. So, I mean, it's definitely a roll the dice situation. You got to just kind of make do what you have with bye weeks, which is tough, especially when you have a few guys out. So overall, don't love some of the guys that he has to play, but I mean, there are some big guys that are playing. I mean, Josh Allen's playing at New England.
Yep.
We mentioned AJ Brown in that Sunday night game at home against Miami. There could be a lot of points in that game. And then we'll see what the health is of Debo. If he does play on Monday night, I know he was like a day-to-day guy, along with a couple of those other guys in San Fran from that game in Cleveland. So we'll see. Those are three guys that he definitely is going to have to lean in on. And then Laporta, I know Laporta has been kind of battling a calf injury, a little subdued game. I mean, targets were there, but not necessarily the catches last week. So we'll see. He's going to have to rely on the guys that got him there. Those four guys for sure, with some kind of plug and play matchups.
Yeah, I think Jaylen Warren ends up finding his way into Arby's starting lineup.
I was looking at that as well. Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, moving over to the Bastards, starting with Justin Herbert. He has a rougher matchup than he has in the past against Kansas City. I think Kansas City in the past has been like a funnel for passing. Their defense is awesome this year. Their pass rush is good, and their secondary is playing pretty well. So I think Herbert. Obviously, I think Herbert. He's a must start. But I'm not sure what I think it could be a rough spot for the Chargers overall. So Christian Kirk also. I think Lattimore will probably be on Ridley. So I think Christian Kirk is a real solid play. I think he out targeted Ridley again. He's been their wide receiver one the last few weeks in terms of production. Amari Cooper at Indy, it's a real good spot, especially if Deshaun Watson comes back. But even if it's PJ Walker, I think Amari Cooper is in a pretty good spot. B-Rob at the Giants, not the confidence that I want to feel in Brian Robinson, but I do think he could get there. He's due for another touchdown week here, and I think Sam Howell can at least get them down there. You're hoping for a touchdown with B-Rob because Antonio Gibson's been out targeting in the last few weeks. Saquon, he always destroys the Washington franchise, so I think he's going to get his. Evan Ingram, I think, can get his against New Orleans. Pickens, hey, now that even with Deontay coming back, I mean, I think Pickens is still in a pretty good spot. And then he's got Vegas at Chicago, and Tyler Bagent. Bagent is his last name. He's from Shepherd College, which sounds like a made up school.
A made up name.
But what?
So it sounds like a made up name.
Yeah.
Bagent.
And he looked way overmatched when he came in relief. So we'll see. But yeah, I mean it's a tight match for this. I'm actually gonna take the Bastards in this one.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I think I've again mentioned it earlier. I feel like I've been not favoring Logue in the previous 2 weeks matchups just based off of what his team looked like, and they've kind of stuck it to me. He gets kind of all of his players back, so to speak. Overall in terms of his starting lineup, I would say. I mean, besides Connor on the IR right now, but all in all, I mean, this is kind of the lineup that he would roll out on a week-to-week basis. So, and I like the Vegas play, in terms of just streaming defenses. So yeah, I got Logue in this one as well.
Good deal. Let's move right along down to the Beeve and Colombian White. We don't need to spend too much time on this one. No offense to their managers. I think we've just discussed their teams pretty much in depth, but we can roll through who they're looking to start. So I'll kick it off with Phil. He's projected 103. He has Deshaun Watson in. Who knows what's going on with that? Phil actually picked up Kyler Murray, who just opened his practice window, I thought, which was a pretty savvy move. Put him right on the IR. Surprised that he dropped Matthew Stafford, though. I probably would have drafted CEH, or would have dropped CEH, I should say. But either way, not sure if Stafford will get picked up. But I mean, Phil's team, it's the same thing week in, week out. He's hoping for big games from Adams, Walker, and Kelsey. And if Deshaun plays, I think he feels pretty good about them in Indy. We'll see. He's got New England home against Buffalo. It's a tough spot. New England's D, they play hard, but Josh Allen destroyed them in the playoffs and has been good against them recently. Michael Thomas, he's probably going to get 10 points because that's what he does. And Alexander Mattison in a rough spot home against San Francisco. But Josh Palmer, maybe this is the week that he gets there. He had a couple end zone targets. And I don't know if Phil has anyone on his bench that I would consider playing. Maybe I would flex Pitts, but I think he's kind of just rolling with what he's got. Cortland Sutton's probably going to be locked up on Jair Alexander. So don't feel good about that. Yeah, I mean, I think it's another matchup where we're kind of just I know what to expect with Phil's team. So I'm sorry. One last thing on Kelce. I do think Travis Kelce could get like 35.
Yeah, he looked like he was getting back in form last week a little bit. So.
Yeah. So go over to Nils' team and kind of give a rundown on what his outlook is.
Yeah, I mean, so similar to noting that Madison matchup. I mean, he Kirk Cousins in primetime games at home against San Francisco Monday night. He is not playing. He's gonna roll the dice with Wilson there. At home against Green Bay, which is probably a good play. Just knowing Kirk Cousins and primetime games and that defense, what they're doing. So, Waddle at Philly. We'll see. I think there's going to be a lot of points in that game, so it could be a good matchup for just anybody in that game in terms of offensive players. Drake London, we talked about, been really good. Stevenson at home against Buffalo. I don't know. He popped last week. I don't know what he's going to get. He's going to roll with Ford, it looks like, as well. Which, I guess he kind of split work, but definitely looked like probably the starting running back. But Hunt's certainly making a roll out there for him.
Yeah.
So that'll be an interesting play to see, but they're playing at Indy. So I do think they'll be able to move the ball on the ground. I mean, and then Logan Thomas would kind of, dud after a big week, but I mean, I like Nils' matchups overall. I mean, there's nothing out there that screams like I'm going to get a ton of points. So I think that's why the projections are what they are between these two guys. I mean, I guess I give a slight edge to Phil's team just based off of a couple of guys that I think could, the Walker, Kelce, Adams, I think is definitely going to be getting right this week. So just those three guys alone present, options for him to get, 30, I would say 20 to 30 points from any of those guys. Or maybe all of them potentially based off of their matchups. So I'm going to give the edge, I think, to Phil in this one.
I think I'm going to take Phil as well. I think his high players or the studs that he actually does have are better than any starter on Nils' team. I do like Waddle in this spot. I like London. He's kind of moved into must-start territory, though I do think it could get a little ugly. I think Tampa was embarrassed at home. They have another home match against Desmond Ridder, quarterback, who's just ripe for the picking against Todd Bowles' defense. But I think Kelce goes off against LA. I think Walker goes nuts and runs all over Arizona because Arizona's been awful against running backs so far this year. Kyren Williams just destroyed him last week. And if Devontae plays, I feel really good about his spot in Chicago and the X factor with Deshaun Watson. If he plays, we'll see. Maybe he looks a little bit better, but that's kind of where I'm at. I potentially think Phil might look to a different defense. I'm not sure what's out there, but not a huge fan of the New England spot, but we'll see. I mean, Phil's one of those managers where he plays things that I don't think should be played, and then they do well, and I look foolish. But overall, I think it'll be a lower scoring game. I think like it'll be like 111 to 101 or 98 to like 86 or something like that. Just in terms of what the projections are. So we both have Phil.
Both have Phil. We're deadlocked right now, but four matches. Well, maybe three. Yeah, I'm sorry, three more matchups. So we can always split in these next couple.
Yeah, we gotta get some variety in here.
There's a couple good ones coming up.
All right, let's move to the 6v1 matchup. It's Finkel against Rick. So Finkel is actually a sort of a heavy favorite here. He's going back to Sam Howell. at the Giants, which makes a lot of sense. Sam Howell's been throwing the ball a ton. He's been getting sacked a lot, but he's been throwing the ball a ton. And as we said before, he's the quarterback 14 on the year. Keenan Allen, obviously, he's a smash play whenever he plays. Mike Evans against Atlanta, very likely. I think this is a pretty decent spot for Baker, though. I think Mike Evans might see a lot of AJ Terrell, who's been awesome this year. So this might be a Chris Godwin week. But it's hard to sit Evans, especially when he has Thielen on a bye. Maybe he plays Jacoby Myers in that spot, who's actually been, I think he's like a top 20 receiver this year. He's been awesome. ETN, rough spot for ETN against the Saints. But he's a must play. ETN's been a monster this year. He's been one of the true workhorses in the NFL. We'll see what happens with Christian McCaffrey. My gut is that McCaffrey sits, or he plays and doesn't get a lot of work. We'll see, though. Every time he's been playing, even if he's been sort of hobbled and limited, he gets all the touches. So I think it might be a situation where McCaffrey just says, I'm going to play, and Kyle's going to use him. Goddard, obviously, DJ Moore locked in, and then the Rams against Kenny Pickett and the Steelers. So I think Anthony's in a pretty good spot. I'm actually going to pick Anthony in this matchup before we even get to Rick's team. But why don't you run down Rick's team, and then we'll get your pick.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of touched a little bit on it, so I won't dwell too much. I mean, he's got a good starting rundown here when you go with Mahomes against the Chargers. I feel like he always seems to put up points no matter what. He's been down a little bit the last 3 weeks, Mahomes. I think less than 20 the last 3 weeks, somewhere around that. I think maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong.
23 against Minnesota, but points still stands.
Yeah. So just not not having the Mahomes light games when you take him so high. But I do think he's going to put up some points this week. Diggs, we know what he's been doing all year. I think Nakua, we kind of talked about a little down game, but certainly a guy that's getting his looks there. So I don't, he's projected 15, which I think is just based off of the work he's already had this season. So yeah, I think that's a good play. This is really where it's going to come down to, I think, for this matchup is, who Rick has to play at running back. He's got Roschon Johnson in right now, who, as we noted, hasn't practiced. Still off that concussion from week 5. So we'll see if he gets back in the lineup and what kind of role he does have. We mentioned, Latavius Murray, who's been a thorn in my side, but I don't necessarily know unless he gets a touchdown against New England or.
Yeah, you're praying for a touchdown.
Yeah, and then, I guess he does have Charbonnet, as a potential to kind of fill in there in one of those roles. But he's dealing with his own issue, and he hasn't really looked like anything special.
It looks slow.
Walker. Yeah, Walker just looks
to me.
Yeah, they were hyping this guy up, but hasn't done anything really to cut into the work from Walker. And then I guess he did spend or pick up. I don't know if he spent any fab. I can't remember on Reynolds, but that's kind of.
I think he did. I think it was maybe like 9 or something.
Yeah, so that's just a flyer. Hey, if Montgomery and Gibbs, who I think Gibbs practiced. Yeah, regardless, I think it was. I know he shelled out or
9.
At least there we go. Okay.
Yep.
So yeah, so it'll be an interesting play there with his running backs, and Anthony might have run into the same thing in the matchup because if McCaffrey sits, he probably has played Gus Edwards.
Yeah.
So whatever, he's getting the run, I guess, but not necessarily a great play against Detroit, especially since he doesn't really own the backfield, out and out. So, but I still think the other players on Anthony's matchups are just, and that even with ETN and possibly McCaffrey, even without McCaffrey taken out of that lineup and sliding Edwards in, I still think I give a slight edge to Ant. To your point of the matchups and some of the guys he has already out there. But yeah, McCaffrey will be a big piece, and if he does play, what kind of role it's in, because really that's the only side that I see breaking up the rest of the lineup. Side by side here between the two. Running backs are really the only weakness, I should say, that I see on Rick's team right now with some of the injuries.
Yeah. I think I'm going to change my pick.
Yeah, Rick.
I'm gonna go with Rick.
Okay.
Reason being, I think for a couple things. I think it could be a real get right spot for Mahomes. Dak, I think, exposed the Chargers defense a little bit. And I think Mahomes can just feast over the middle of the field with Kelsey and Rashee Rice kind of stepping up. I think they're going to try to take away Diggs in New England, but he's been too good. I think he'll get his. And I completely overlooked that this is a George Kittle week. Because he's flip-flopped, and this is a get right spot for George Kittle against Minnesota, who sends a ton of pressure, and the middle of the field is wide open. So I think this could be a monster spot for Kittle, and I think Tampa is a pretty good spot against Desmond Ridder, and they can get like 10 or 12. So I'm going to change my pick to Rick, and
all right,
you're sticking with Ant, right?
I'll stick with Ant. You keep the split there.
Cool. All right, let's move on. We have two more matchups, and then we'll get to power rankings. Let's go to Steve versus Ryan. It's the 8 versus 3 with Steve in 8th and Ryan in 3rd. Ryan projected 110 to Steve's 103. You kick us off. Which team do you want to start with, and give the rundown on your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll start with Riggs, just because he's on the left here for me. So, I mean, he's got to go with Love. Stroud's on bye. Fields hurt. I don't think that's a bad play coming out of a bye week at Denver. I mean, if you can't get right against Denver, where the Packers, I should say, are in deeper trouble than we anticipated. Just how they looked in the beginning of the year, and this should be a smash spot for him, Watson, pretty much any Packer offensive player. Should be in a good spot. So I like the Love play this week. Devontae Smith, I think it's a bounce back spot against Miami at home on Sunday night, just based off of what he did the last 2 games. But again, anyone in that offense, could pop off and have big games, and someone else have a subdue game. So I think it's still a good spot for him. I just mentioned Watson. Eckler against Kansas City. I mean, we'll see if he starts.
Tough spot.
Yeah, it's tough. Definitely a tough spot, but let's see how much they kind of rely on him like they did before he got hurt. In week 1, he was getting the majority of the run, I should say, and the carries. But yeah, tough spot for sure at Kansas City. They've looked like a pretty decent defense overall, I think, Kansas City. So tough spot, but Mostert at Philly, again, another tough spot for that D line. Mm-hmm. But I just feel like he's going to find a way to in the end zone regardless, at least getting one, just based off of how that offense has been playing and his usage in it. So we'll see. I think that's still a good matchup, not a great one. He's got to play Fant, which I don't really love, but it is what it is. You got to play the tight end roulette a little bit, just based off of, he has Ferguson, and he never really attacked the tight end spot during the draft. It was one of those positions where he was like, I'm just going to grab whoever. So, and then we mentioned Lockett earlier, and I think San Fran at Minnesota is a great spot as well. So, I overall, before we get to Ryan's team, I think I would maybe bill as like potential matchup of the week. Just based on
so too.
Just based off of maybe not necessarily the projections, but just like looking at the overall team structures this week for these guys. Both got solid teams, but I'll let you take it away with Ryan. I'm kind of torn. So I don't have a pick yet.
Yeah. Same. I think San Francisco here in the spot with Minnesota could be, I think it wouldn't surprise me if they got like some pick, like a pick 6 against Kirk Cousins or something, especially with no Justin Jefferson. But yeah, going over to Ryan's, Lamar and Andrews, he's got that stack going. I will say Detroit's defense has been one of the stories of their turnaround and why they're 5-1. They're not the cakewalk matchup that they have been before. Alex Anzalone, their linebacker, I imagine if they're going to spy, he'll probably spy Lamar a couple times, but Lamar hasn't really been rushing like he has outside of the game against Indy. But I think, obviously he's playing Lamar. Amon-Ra he's locked in. Pittman, tough spot against Cleveland at home, especially with Gardner, but he's going to get his looks. We're due for a Bijan breakout game. Does it happen against Tampa? Maybe. He's playing Kareem Hunt at Indy. He's got the Andrew stack with Lamar. Ayuk against Minnesota could be an eruption spot for Ayuk there. And then Buffalo at New England. I think they're good for at least 4 sacks on Mac Jones or whoever New England brings in to replace Mac. So, I mean, Ryan's just rolling with the matchup with the team that he's had all year. I think he's made one move all season, and that was picking up Josh Kelly and for like 60 fab.
Yeah, I think it'd be like one other move, but yeah, regardless, it's
okay.
Actually, it was one waiver move, 2 moves overall. So
he picked up Claypool because he picked up.
Claypool. Oh yeah, correct.
Yeah. That's hilarious. I think I'm pretty torn on this too. I do think Steve's in a pretty, some of his matchups are in pretty good spots. Like I think Devontae's in a pretty good spot, especially for a bounce back. But I'm just gonna go with Ryan. I think he has a better team, top to bottom, and outside of the running back position. But I mean, I'm going with just who the favorite is, but I think Ryan's team has been a lot steadier than Steve's kind of the entire year. So that's where I'm going. I just feel more confident in Ryan's roster, I think, overall.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna unfortunately to close out these matchups. This is the last one, I believe, right? Yeah. So this
we actually have one more. It's Andy and Aaron.
Do we? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm gonna, I should say, stick with Tiburon as well, based off of, like you say, kind of the steadiness. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Steve finds a way to win just based off of the guys he has and the matchups.
This could be Love and Watson could be a key.
That's big, yeah, for sure. And I do think, like, if any of those guys have like a monster game, like let's say Eckler gets in for 2, or Mostert again has a big game for whatever reason, that could definitely jumpstart some of it. But I think there's just too much steadiness on the other side for Ryan, so I can't. It's hard for me to shy away from Ryan with that lineup. So I'm going to stick with Ryan as well.
I think this is where we might differ. I think this is the matchup of the week, even though the Bandits are only projected for 97. His backs are. How many people does he have on bye? Chase, Chuba, Pollard.
A tough week.
Yeah, tough week. But the 2v5 matchup, I mean, it's hard. I'm going to pick Andy. It's hard for me to go away from Andy's team with Aaron having so many players on bye. I mean, Jalen in Miami, he's going to be good. He's going to put up points. Tyreek at Philly, he's the most uncoverable player in the league, and he's going to probably put up 15 to 26. Godwin against Atlanta, like I said, I think AJ Terrell is probably going to be on Mike Evans, and I think this could be a pretty good spot for Godwin. Taylor against Cleveland, don't love that matchup at all, but if he does enough in the passing game, Swift, I think, is in a really good spot as well, coming off a game where I think Swift had like 11 targets last week, 10 targets last week against the Jets. I mean, Swift he's obviously a must start. He's borderline RB1 rest of way. Waller, I think, is in a really good spot against Washington with Tyrod. He had 7 targets last week. He should have caught that last touchdown if he wasn't held. Yeah. That's a conversation for another day. And he's getting Deontay back against the Rams, who have been pretty feisty against wide receivers. But anytime Deontay's on the field, he's going to get targets. And I think Washington Z against Tyrod, they're going to get sacks. The Giants have the worst offensive line in the league. But yeah, I think Andy's, he's healthy. He doesn't really have anyone of consequence on bye. So I think his team's locked in, ready to go. So that's where I'm going to go. Are you in agreement?
Yeah, I mean, this was probably the easiest one when I was going down this a little bit earlier, like just to see what the projections were and like matchups. I mean, you're missing Chase and Pollard, Aaron in terms of the Bandits this week. I mean, that's really hard to fill in any situation, no matter what your bench depth looks like. So, I mean, the running back spots leave a lot to be desired. Just with Justice, with Hill and Javonte kind of filling in those spots with Pollard and really his RB2, depending on what back out of Carolina, he's going to roll with, I would say is probably moving forward, at least as he's constructed, that kind of he's missing his 1-2 RBs and his top receiver this week.
Yeah.
So hard to go against Andy. And I think Andy made out really well in that trade. I think to your point, Godwin has been really consistent, especially over the last 2 weeks, as you mentioned, leading the team, kind of taking away a little bit of Mike Evans had such a hot start. But Godwin's certainly come around and just been really consistent. So I think that ends up being a really good spot for Andy to kind of lean on, and it kind of solidifies kind of his wide receivers now with Deontay coming back from Pittsburgh. So and I think Swift is in a smash spot this week. I think they get back to the ground game for sure after a tough loss against the Jets, and Miami's gonna give up some points. They know that just based on what their offense has been doing, and that defense didn't look great, Miami, I should say, at the start of that Carolina game last week. So, and they're going into Philly. So, yeah, I think it's hard to go against Andy here.
Yeah, I will say some X factors for Aaron's team that I think could happen. If McCaffrey does sit, he does have Elijah Mitchell. I imagine he would put him in over Justice Hill very likely. And I think it could be a get right spot for Olave. He's been solid. He's been getting looks. He just hasn't really connected with Derek Carr. Derek Carr's not really throwing downfield a lot. But this feels like a spot where Olave can get in the end zone. But I also anticipate Ridley getting shadowed by Lattimore. I said that before. So yeah, a tough spot for Tua also. Because I think Philly's D can get after it, and I think they're going to be wanting a get right spot after they lost against the Jets. So, did we go 6 together?
Well, we went 5 out of 6.
Okay.
So yeah, we differed when you went back on. You took Rick over for Anth.
Okay.
I kept Anth.
Got it. Okay. Cool.
Was relatively surprised, even based off projections, that you picked against yourself, but. Any case,
it's hard to pick the 12th team in the power rankings.
Fair, but yeah, you ended up getting a game on me last week, just in the pick'em. So you're at 10-8 overall for the year, and I'm at 9-9. So we're sitting basically around 500.
Cool.
We've been agreeable on the majority of them, I should say. Haven't hit on all of them, but most of them we've been kind of agreeing on. So, but let's fire away the power rankings, and we'll wrap this up.
Yeah. Good deal. So I'm just gonna run down the first 5 that I have. I have a top 5. I think I wouldn't say it's a clear top. No, let me start with the top 3. It's just the teams that are. I mean, it kind of follows along suit. So I have Rick in 1. I have Andy at 2, and I have Ryan at 3. So just kind of sticking right with the league. Okay. Yeah. Then 4, I have Anthony at 4. I know he's at 6, but it's hard to put anyone lower than 4 that has 821 points. 5, I have Arby's.
Okay.
6, I have Logue, and 7, I have Aaron. And then we can round it out with I have Steve at 8.
Yeah, so the 5, 6, and 7 were kind of hard for me to kind of go through, because I try to subjectively just look at teams and kind of how they're built.
Sure.
And they're all there, obviously, record wise as well. I mean, I think there's a 1 game difference, if you want to call it, between RBs and the Bandits and the Bastards, but I had the Bandits at 5.
Okay.
Now that was kind of a tough pick between him and Arby's for me. Actually, I had the Bastards at 7, even though, again, I'm not trying to pick against him. I just think overall team structure, and he's really trying to fill in from a losing a first round pick too from Logan's standpoint. So those were hard. I mean, all 3 of those guys I think have really, really good rosters, and it's really just every given week, kind of like what they do. And I agree with you at having Steve at 8. So I think our top 8's pretty close. So I'm glad we're going to run through this quick. 9, 10, 11, 12. I mean, we might actually agree on this too. I mean, 9, I had Colombian White.
Same.
Obviously, I just think he's slightly ahead of the pack of the 3 that are down in the cellar. 10, I have to give it to Beeve. There's no chance I can pick either one of us over him after him beating me last week and sitting just above us in the win-loss column. Although I do think overall, I mean, he has the least amount of points. So I mean, we'll see.
Yeah.
But
I had you at 10. And okay. I have you at 10 and I have Nils at 11. I just think like moving forward throughout the rest of the weeks, I just think Burrow is going to get healthier and healthier. And the way that I kind of try to remember fantasy working is the middle of the year is such a gauntlet. And toward the end of the year, we kind of remember like why we drafted players where we drafted them. And I think Burrow can, after, their bye, I think Burrow can kind of get right and start flaming people. So I like that X factor. I know he beat you, and I feel like whenever people do power rankings, it's always like, oh, how can you have this team above this team because they lost? But it's like, well, because their outlook's a little better. But so I have you at 10, I have Nils at 11, and I have myself in the basement.
Yeah, I mean, we just flip-flopped. I do think roster-wise, I like my team, not just non-biased, just looking at the players a little bit more than I like Nils's team. But to your point, I lost him. So it's like, how can I put myself ahead of a guy that just beat me, especially after we're recapping the week that I lost him? But I agree. I think, but it might be, again, like too little too late. I mean, especially if I lose this week too. That Cup injury early, and then Cincinnati kind of just having such a slow start between him and Higgins. And then you factor in the Jones injury. I mean, I'm not trying to do it's fine segment at the end of this, but we both have had some we've had some misery to deal with it early on in this year for sure.
It's been tough, but so that is, we are coming at I think an hour and a half, just about. So
okay, cut it down.
Yeah, so not bad. But we got through everything. I think we'll continue to try to condense it. I think the sweet spot's like an hour 10. But that's all we got. We appreciate the support from the league. It's been awesome to continue to do this every week. I know the feedback that I've gotten from the league has been awesome.
Likewise.
Yeah. So it's been cool. And I know our views on YouTube have like kind of gone up. I think we've had a couple views that that I don't even know, because it's cool like how the different
you can see it.
Yeah, how our like
always
views
curious
get
about
like
that.
funneled. Yeah, so it's pretty cool. So nice. So it's been a lot of fun. So we're excited to keep doing this. My schedule might get a little nuts as we kind of come into some personal family things, but in the next couple of weeks. But we will still be potting. That is my promise. So so anyway, G, thank you again. As always, awesome stuff. Have a great Week 7. Starts off tomorrow night with Jacksonville and New Orleans.
I'm sure we'll be texting.
Yeah, we'll be texting. But everyone, as always, thank you for the support, and let's have a good week.
Take care, man.
Take care.